masculinity was something that I had to work really, really hard to display to a level that was kind of acceptable to my other male peers. And then to kind of be told that that is toxic or aggressive or negative in some way, I think can be kind of hard to swallow sometimes.
There's a very distorted view of who a perpetrator is. Like, it's a stranger at night in an alleyway, and they can be our really trusted people. They can be people who, you know, we love or who we respect.
I don't like her going to the beach wearing her old bikinis that don't fit anymore. If she's wearing that and she knows that I don't like that, then she's kind of like crossing my boundary because she's doing something I don't like. That's not a boundary. That's just
Yeah.
like, you're just telling her what to dress and how to wear.
When we talk about power, it's easy to imagine brute force or obvious authority figures. But in relationships, power is often more subtle. It can show up when someone's older, has more money, or holds a position of trust, like a coach, mentor, or teacher. It can show up in all sorts of close relationships too, like friendships or family, and of course, it can also show up in sexual and romantic relationships. Today, we'll dive into topics like power imbalances, grooming, and coercive control, looking at how age gaps, social leverage, and even financial status can create imbalances that harm or pressure someone into doing things they really don't want to do. We'll also explore why these imbalances aren't always easy to spot and how recognizing them can help us build safer, more equitable connections. To help me explore and discuss all of this, I have by my side Georgia Grace, a sex educator who is normalizing the conversation around intimacy, sex, and relationships.
Hey.
Campbell Harrison, a professional sports climber and Olympian who uses his position as a queer athlete to advocate for women and the LGBTQIA+ community.
Hello.
And Will Smith, Ugumbangi and Anawan man, former NRL player and dad of 4 kids.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. The intent of these podcasts is to get into the nitty-gritty of these conversations, which can usually be a bit complex and feel awkward and scary to enter into. So we've been kind of setting the tone of these episodes by asking a quote-unquote silly question each just to kick it off, and hopefully we can answer it at some point in the podcast. So, Georgia, would you like to kick us off with a silly question?
Yeah, I wonder if it's silly or maybe I'm just curious about it, joined by 3 men here. I really want to know or learn about what it was like for you growing up as men and what you were taught about power and I guess your individual experiences of that.
That'll be really interesting to explore. How about you, Campbell?
I think I want to know how to tell the difference between someone asserting coercive control and maybe someone just telling me what to do in my best interest. You know, maybe that's a parent or a teacher. Well, you know, where's that line between them just telling me how they feel versus telling me how to feel?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting one. And how about you, Will?
Just hearing the term love bombing, I don't really know. Never heard that before, so just trying to understand what that is.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll hopefully answer and get into all of those. We might actually kick it off with your silly question, Georgia. So what were we, I guess, as men taught about power growing up? Campbell, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, growing up, I wasn't really taught very much about it. I don't think anyone really communicated to me that I had a sort of like assumed power as a man. I think to some degree, maybe I understood that. It was like that you had to, you know, treat women with respect and that sort of thing. But I don't think I was ever directly taught to appreciate like the imbalance, the power imbalance that gender can kind of assign to people in society. So I think that was something I had to learn much older and through like various experiences and through other people putting in the time to teach me or to sort of evoke that sense in myself that I wanted to learn more. So, you know, I think that's probably a common experience for a lot of guys that they haven't been taught or they aren't taught up until a certain point.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say I wasn't really taught power. A lot of the relationships around me, my parents, grandparents, it was all 50-50, meet each other halfway, and no one's bigger than the other and or has more power than the other. So, yeah.
I think personally, like growing up, I guess, nothing was explicitly taught, but you just kind of witness and sort of take in things by like osmosis almost. And, you know, whether it was at like that kind of like provider archetype that the man has to be, and then like growing up realizing, I don't really want to be a provider. I don't think I've got that in me. But then also working in like a corporate environment for a while there as well, and realizing that, oh, like this is great, but I think it's more great for me because of sort of my position as a man, and a lot of the leadership positions were taken up by men, and I didn't really know how to feel about that, because I could like feel that I was benefiting more than say others, but also didn't necessarily know how to make it more equitable or like work against the system.
I think that's it. I think I was very much taught, not so directly, but very much taught the expectations of what it is to quote unquote be a man, to, to be assertive and strong and confident. But I don't think I was ever really taught the connection between those characteristics and the power that they can kind of give you, and the power that you take on when you've been taught your whole life to act in that way, in a way that women are very much discouraged from, I would say. And so I think it's quite interesting that I took on those lessons and I felt this immense pressure to be a certain way, and in a lot of ways probably became privileged from that, but was never, I guess, directly aware of the other side of the coin.
Yeah, because I think it's a really interesting time at the moment where we're hearing more of these words or terms like toxic masculinity, and I know that a lot of men who I work with in session, or men that I speak to, have had to kind of grapple with these ideas of power that they have never really thought about. How are you all feeling at the moment with these sort of more cultural conversations emerging that use terms like toxic masculinity or talk about the responsibility that men have?
I mean, I think it's easy to become defensive against when your masculinity is described as toxic. I don't know if other men on the couch can sort of relate, but I always felt like masculinity was something that I had to work really, really hard to display to a level that was kind of acceptable to my other male peers. And it was such a conscious effort all the time to do away with my sort of more feminine mannerisms and assert masculinity, and then to kind of be told that is like toxic or aggressive or negative in some way, I think can be kind of hard to swallow sometimes, because you're like, well, I've been working so hard to be this thing that people are expecting you to be, and then you're being told that actually that's also the wrong way to be. And so I can see how that can be, like a difficult pill to swallow sometimes for a lot of young boys, perhaps.
How do you feel about George's question, Will?
Yeah, no, I haven't really had these sort of conversations before, so I'm sort of just learning and listening to you guys as we go.
Yeah, I guess it's really interesting because it is something that I think I have thought about a lot my whole life as a woman, and also as a queer woman, but also as a white woman, and the ways in which those identities have afforded me power, and also being acutely aware of many situations where I felt like I don't have much power. And even in sessions sometimes, like if I've had a few situations where a man has come into session and sort of asserted dominance, and I felt really quite anxious or nervous just because of also the size of my body too. Like they can often be bigger than me, and it's something that I think I'm really excited for this conversation, because there are so many different intersections of the ways that we all have probably experienced it, and we're maybe all coming to terms with it as well.
Yeah, and to go back to your point about sort of, I guess, how I would feel as a young man with these conversations, and being a bit more open and happening more often, kind of similar to you, I think you mentioned, Campbell, like at first, I think there was an instinct to get defensive when I was first like hearing about it years ago, and then I don't remember exactly what the turning point was necessarily, but to kind of go, all right, well, let's just focus on like what healthy masculinities can be. And I think, I feel like maybe to generalize, men are maybe less aware of the power we like automatically hold, because it's, it benefits us, and, you don't think twice about it. But maybe I'd be curious about your experience growing up. Were you more aware of this than the men around you?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, my dad's a feminist, so he actually taught me a lot about feminism. But I mean, it was even things in the playground, like, don't run like a girl, or don't behave like a girl, or I've got two brothers, and, even playing with kids on the street, like not being included in the games because I was a woman. So yeah, I was often really aware of that. But then it also sort of going into high school, I was aware of, I guess, how unsafe I felt in many situations. And I haven't sort of really realized that till later in life, like the ways in which young boys, or they were teenagers at the time, may have sort of coerced me to say something or do something or engage with something that I, reflecting upon it now, didn't feel good, or I didn't want to do it. So yeah, I think that it could be these really subtle things that in the ways that we're socialized to speak about gender, but also these relational things that go on where I didn't realize that I guess some of the decisions I was making was based on the fact that maybe I felt unsafe, or I didn't know that I could say no, or I just felt like I didn't really have power going into a situation.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful reflection. Thanks, Georgia. So if we can kind of identify that like men might hold this power a bit more automatically in society, Will, do you think it would sort of be fair to say that a similar power imbalance might exist? I feel like from like my experience, maybe like the expectation to make the first move as a guy, or kind of know where to take things in a romantic sense, is kind of like that. Well, the media feeds that narrative that it's sort of on us to kind of be smooth and stuff like that.
Yeah, pay for the dinner and stuff like that.
Yeah, and how does that feel like, if when you were dating, that sort of expectation to pay for a dinner, and then did it feel like, okay, I've done that, I'm owed this, or?
No, I come up, like I said, I had that sort of, those relationships around me as a kid.
Yeah.
Grandparents, my parents, they met each other 50-50, met each other halfway. But yeah, with things like that, it was my grandfather or my dad who looked after the family or paid for his wife to go for dinner and stuff like that. And if I've done it in the past with my partner, I don't know, it made me feel good. But the more you do it, it just becomes sort of normal. But it's not like I'm doing that all the time. Like I said, she meets me halfway as well with a lot of things.
Yeah. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Is there a similar experience in queer relationships, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely I'd say some more grey area in queer relationships, because often it's like who does pay for the dinner, and I think it kind of dissects the gender expectations a little bit when you take you almost take the gender out of it. You have two people on the same end of the spectrum. You start to ask a lot of those questions of, hang on, like neither of us is the woman, so what is the gendered expectation in this situation? And I think that definitely led me to sort of start to question a lot of these gender roles when I was like, these don't really pertain to my situation. But hang on, why do they pertain to other situations as well? Like why are these expectations associated to specific gender? And so it kind of opened up the question for me a little bit. But yeah, maybe there is still that same sort of, you can definitely still get that same sort of expectation in queer relationships where one person does one thing and they're automatically assuming that they will, receive something else in return.
A power imbalance is born from age gaps. That might probably more apply to all types of relationships. And, there's that classic rule that you hear heaps growing up, half your age plus 7. How do you think an age gap dynamic affects the power in a relationship, Georgia?
Oh, it can have a huge impact on the power dynamic. And I guess I do see a lot of couples who have an age gap. And I guess what we're talking about here is we're talking about adults who are in a consenting relationship, not someone who is dating a minor or a teenager. Yeah. So anyone over the age of 18. And an age gap that might exist. But yeah, I guess if we're looking at what the power dynamics could be, it could be around how the resources that they have and how much money they have, because typically the older someone is, they've had more time to work and to earn more money. It could be about experience and how much experience they have in different relationships. And then there could also perhaps be argued that there is a certain amount of power that is afforded to the younger person if they, are withered or cool, or like they're attractive, and the power that can come with that. So I think that it's really important for all of us to have these discussions with our partners constantly. Like, what power exists within this dynamic? When do you hold power, and why is that? And is it because of certain privileges or certain identities? And when do I hold power, and in what ways does that affect the way that we can show up together? But yeah, this rule around the age thing is so fascinating, and I can see that people can get really hung up on it. But then I guess there's also the problems that the couple face from outside the relationship. So there will be a lot of kind of social judgment towards the couple if there is a significant age gap. And often what we'll find is that if there is an age gap in a relationship and, their values are aligned and they're really happy and they're feeling safe and they're feeling connected, the thing that they often struggle with most is the perceptions that others have about the relationship, not necessarily an issue or a concern that's going on because of their age difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, Will, to ask, do you notice if there's a difference in the power dynamic between the generations in your family? Because I know personally, sort of having like ethnic grandparents and things like that, and as it's kind of filtered down, it was like a conscious effort as a guy to go, oh no, I'll get up and clear the table as well, and things like that. So do you notice those differences as the generations go down?
I think it's sort of been the same as like you said. Yeah, after dinner, Mum's been cooking or Nan's been cooking, so Pop clean up or Dad take the rubbish out, and the same for me. If my partner, but I feel like it's not a power sort of thing. It's just you meet your partner halfway. Yeah. If she's gonna cook, then it's only right that I clean up. Make life easier for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we might zoom out a bit and look at just power dynamics in everyday life rather than just sort of relationships and romantic relationships. So, Campbell, how do you feel power dynamics play out in non-sexual contexts like workplaces or universities or sport? Because, sometimes you got to like play the game to meet the ends of your, say, career aspirations, like to make it all the way to the Olympics, you might have had to, play the game a bit with someone who's got more power than you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think in almost all social situations, there's going to be some degree of power imbalance, and at times it's going to make more sense than others. Obviously, like an employer is going to have a certain degree of power over their employee, or someone within a management team, in the way that they're instructing them to complete a job a certain way. So you're always going to have to navigate that. It's not specific to like romantic relationships. I think in the world of sport in particular, you definitely see it with athletes. We're very conditioned to like go with what we're told to do, whether that's a physio or a coach and that sort of thing. And again, most of the time, I mean, it ties back to my question at the beginning. It's like most of the time the physio or the coach is telling you to do something for the right reasons and it's for your benefit. And then you become so conditioned to just doing what you're told that it's very, very easy for someone to take advantage of someone in that sort of situation. And it can be very like subtle.
Yeah.
In ways that you don't necessarily notice until you perhaps look back at them, or maybe it crosses a line, I guess.
Do you think maybe there's like a case to answer that the media's kind of distorted our view of power dynamics? Because if like an athlete gets sort of caught out for doing something that's against, whether it's anti-doping codes or whatever, they're not really ever going into the fact that, you are so trusting of the people in your circle. So do you think that's affected how we think about power dynamics in everyday life?
A violation often comes down to, like, we need to look at how, what happened in that case. And so often, if we can look at these power dynamics, what position was the victim survivor in to feel either like they had no choice, or to feel uncomfortable, or to even not know until later in life that it was a violation. I guess there's a very distorted view of who a perpetrator is. Like, it's this idea that it's a stranger at night in an alleyway. And as you said, like, they can be our really trusted people. They can be people who, you know, we love or who we respect. It can be people in our relationships, in our family groups. And that's what makes it that much more confusing or terrifying when this person who was supposed to support you and help you and care for you has treated you so badly.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And also someone who doesn't necessarily see themselves as a perpetrator, I think is really important as well. It's someone who maybe in their own right is misinterpreting a situation, and not that excuses the behavior to any degree, but it's like, I think sometimes, I think we have this idea in our head that people who commit these acts, there's some kind of like insidious evil nature to it, and sometimes it is just someone who thinks that what they're doing isn't wrong when it is, and maybe they've again been socially conditioned to believe that like the power that they hold in that situation is very valid, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the way the world works, and so they're just, you know, it's not their fault that they have this kind of advantage, and they just use it without really thinking.
That's also a really good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And Will, did you have a similar experience in the NRL, like outside of training well to get selected for the team? Like you might have to say the right thing to the coach, say the right thing in the media by the sponsors. Like, did that frustrate you that there might have been all these extra things you had to do to get selected?
You do have to sort of carry yourself in a certain way, the way you do compared to what you do at home, you know. There is a difference. It is a different environment. But yeah, you do have to obviously please a lot of people, your trainers, coaches. It can be draining. You go home and it takes a toll on you. Yeah,
that's perhaps not. Do you think that's recognised enough as like men to go that it's taken its toll, or it doesn't feel great to do all those things?
I think it's sort of like in the sport, it's sort of become the norm. Like it's expected. You turn up and you act like this, and you do this, and this is what the coach is saying, this is what the trainer's saying. This is how we want it done, and you either fall in place or you move on.
Do you feel like there were any maybe other experiences as an NRL player or former NRL player where you know, whether there were power dynamics at play that were sort of for or against your benefit?
I think a lot of players go through it today where they could be injured, and a lot of them have that pressure put on them by either a coach or a physio to, hey, like we need to get you back on the field now, even though you're not 100%.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's either I'll give you a needle or something like that to get you on the field, and the player ends up worse than what he was before the game, you know, then he's missing out. So a lot of players forget that it is a business to the club, and like again, the power sort of side comes in where players think that they need to pay back the club, whereas if the club want to get rid of them tomorrow, then they'll find a way to do that.
Whoa, that must be so intense.
Well, it can, it is a very result-driven business, so, yeah.
And to feel, did you ever feel like disposable and like you had to kind of be on edge and best behaviour and always doing what they're telling you to do?
Yeah, I think I just knew before I came into that system that I sort of seen that, as I had a few people that were there before me that I sort of learnt that from. Yeah, that once you get in there, you know, you need to make sure you're on top of everything. Don't muck up away from the field and everything like that. Yeah.
Wow. Is it the same for you?
Yeah, I think in my sport, in sport climbing, in Australia, not so much because we've only recently sort of come into the funded sports space, but I see it in a lot of other nations for sure, where athletes are expected to undergo changes or like, you know, maybe they're told to lose weight or something like that, and they're told that if you're not willing to do it, someone else is willing to do it. And in the athlete's mind, it quite often is just, well, like this is a competitive field. I have to just, you know, do everything that I need to do to stay on top of my game. But when you really look into it, is someone in a position of authority, of power, exerting control over someone who is kind of powerless to that control. If they want to keep growing within their chosen field, then they have to just submit. And if we don't have those, that's why it's so important in sport and employment in all facets of life, to like have those structures in place to support people, to keep people accountable, to make sure that that sort of power isn't being exerted, where we're not putting like profits over people and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I guess it can really easily sort of back you into a corner with this idea, well, if you don't do it and if you don't do what we say, then someone else will.
Yeah.
And, you know, you get out and there's a whole line of people who are
that's
ready.
right. There's always more coming.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also just that, like, in much less insidious ways, you've always just done what you're told. You turn up to training, your coach tells you to do this many sets of this exercise. Like, they tell you to change this about what you're doing and warm up, cool down, all those things, that it's just part of the game, it's part of the flow, and you get so into the zone of just doing what's being told to you. And then when you're told to do something that you should maybe feel uncomfortable about in the moment, your knee-jerk response is to just do it. Like, yeah, whatever it might be, you know. There's so many ways. I mean, when I think about it often when I'm in like the physiotherapy office, and the physiotherapist is, which fortunately my physios are very good and always like check for consent and everything, but so often they're just like, oh, yep, this is a muscle in your groin that I need to release, and boom, all of a sudden their hands are like basically down your pants, like massaging something, and there's nothing insidious about it necessarily. Like, you have an injury, this person's trying to help you in your injury, help your sport, but it's just assumed, the consent in that instance, in that circumstance, is just consumed.
Like agency over your own body. You know,
yeah,
not much
exactly.
free will to...
Exactly. And you just, because you've been there every week before, and they've just, you know, they'll do the same thing to your shoulder, the same thing to your knee, whatever it is. And then, so when they do it somewhere that perhaps isn't so comfortable, you just let it happen. You're so used to it happening. And then maybe you think back, you know, a few hours, few days, few years down the line, you go, hang on a second. Like, I just completely gave away my agency because of this dynamic that I'm so accustomed to. You know, it's not always this like really dark kind of way. It just happens sometimes.
They're amazing reflections about your experience in like elite sport. Thanks. And the fact that, like, you know, there's sort of this unspoken do it because you're getting paid well and you're getting notoriety out of it. And I think that's still really relatable to people who, you know, aren't elite athletes or getting any sort of fame or notoriety. Like, whether you're working in corporate Australia and you might not be paid that much, but there's the promise of opportunity, so work late or do this. So that's actually, it's really great to hear that about elite athletes, because there is a perception in the media that just do it because, you know, you get paid a lot of money, shut up and play or whatever. Well, we might move on to attachment styles, Georgia. So do you mind sort of explaining what they are, and then how do they feed into power dynamics, and how can sort of different attachment styles work, and who might have the power versus who might not? Yeah,
great question. And I think that a lot of people are really curious about attachment styles because it's all over TikTok and it's all over social media. But basically, we call it attachment theory. So the reason that I like to say theory is that, you know, it may not necessarily apply to everyone. So as I'm talking, you know, for anyone listening or, you know, anyone here, you know, some bits may feel relevant, but some bits may not. But essentially, attachment theory suggests that the way that we show up in relationships in the present is based on the relationships that we've had in the past. The research was traditionally done on the relationship between mother and child, and it essentially said the way the child feels about the mother will then affect every single other relationship they ever have. But then, you know, since, you know, more research has come out and family dynamics are pretty different, we can recognize that someone may not have had a mother, or maybe their close sort of parenting relationship was with a grandparent or an auntie. But then they also look at the fact that sibling relationships can affect people, but also really close friendships, and then also romantic relationships as well. So it's since sort of gone on to I guess, theorize that the relationships that we've had in the past can affect the relationships that we have currently. And there is essentially 4 different styles that they found. So the first is secure. And essentially secure refers to the feeling that you can show up in a relationship and you feel safe and connected and welcome, and you can also move away from that person and you still feel safe and connected and fine. Anxious attachment is essentially this feeling that when you are with someone or when you're without them, you're feeling really anxious. And anxiety can often feel like upregulated, your heart can be beating quite fast, you're feeling quite hyper aware. Then there's avoidance. So this feeling that, I'm feeling a bit unsafe, I'm just going to tap out. Like this feeling like I want to run away or I want to avoid this person. I want to be close to them, but this all feels so overwhelming and I'm going to avoid it. And then the last attachment style has a few different names. It could be chaotic or disorganized. And often what that refers to, if someone is traumatized, they're living or working with trauma, so they feel more disorganized in their attachment to others. So what can be really interesting is that often the dynamic will appear where an anxious person and an avoidant person will show up in a relationship together, and they kind of have this feeling where the anxious person moves towards, and then the avoidant person gets quite overwhelmed with that, and then they'll move away. So they're kind of doing this thing. And I guess the power dynamic that we need to, I guess, scrutinize or become aware of is how can we support all people in feeling safe in that dynamic? So asking the anxious person, what are you noticing when you feel anxious? What are you needing? What would support you in feeling safe and regulated and connected? What do you feel like you're not currently getting? Or how could your partner support you in that? But also, what will you need to do for yourself? And what responsibility will you need to take for yourself to not put all the pressure on your partner to be everything for you? And then the avoidant person, I guess questions that I get curious about is, what do you need in order to have that time where you can have space for yourself, where you can move away, where you can have that experience of either running and, creating distance when you need it, but then what can you do to come back to this person when you are feeling safe and regulated? So yeah, it's an ongoing process where I guess we need to develop that awareness of identifying in ourselves what is showing up for me right now? What are these emotional experiences? And how can I communicate that to my partner so that they can also feel, safe and comfortable and give to me what they're able and willing to give to me?
Incredible explanation.
And there's just so much more. Like there is so much more that, we could dive into. And I'm not sure if anyone else has come across this or has ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I can very much relate to. Like in my own relationship, I remember at the beginning, I was definitely very much like an anxious attachment. And I think it was really, really important for me to have that realization that I had an anxious attachment style, at least at the beginning of the relationship, because I think I was kind of in my mind, I was saying that I felt like my partner was avoidant because they weren't giving me like everything that I felt I needed. And then I think I had to kind of realize that maybe I was actually like expecting too much or wanting too much. And I had to like train myself or teach myself to be able to like take a step back and be okay with, not getting messages back as, straight away, or them not necessarily needing to be sitting with me, talking with me all the time, sort of thing.
Did that make you feel like you had less power?
Being anxious of attachment or
needing your partner more than you thought that they needed you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess yes, to a degree. I think like every relationship, there were probably lots of other factors that contributed to the power dynamics of ours. Like there's a slight age gap of like 4 or 5 years, so that was a factor. He was renting the apartment that we both ended up living in together, whereas I had just been living at home up until then. So there are lots of different factors that sort of come into the power dynamic beyond just the attachment styles. But I think it was quite it was quite important for me to realize that. And then I was able to kind of, work myself back out of it again a little bit.
This might be a silly question, but can your attachment style change depending on the attachment style of the person you're with? I feel like I identified with a few of those in like different scenarios that I've been in.
Not a silly question. And I think that this is sort of a rabbit hole that many people can get into. They're like, oh, okay, so my identity is anxious attachment, and they sort of hook on to that. But it's not necessarily the case. Like, we can experience different attachments based on the different dynamics and relationships. So someone might also say, I feel really secure with my friends, but I feel really avoidant with romantic partners. Or they might say, with this person I dated, I was avoidant. With that person, I was anxious. And this person, I feel secure. But I think an important thing to also bring our awareness to is the fact that often our attachment styles flare up when we're stressed. So we may not be experiencing that every single day, but often at the start of a relationship too, it's pretty normal to feel anxious, or it's pretty normal to feel uncertain. Like, that can be the thing that also drives the excitement, because you don't know when they're going to text back. Like, you don't know when you're going to see them next. You don't know if you're going to have sex at the end of a date. Like, that can feel like butterflies for some and really exciting, and then sometimes people can feel really overwhelmed and anxious. And it also is something that we can work on. And I think it was really interesting to hear you say that an important piece was actually just bringing awareness to it. And, take it with a grain of salt. It's a theory, so you may relate to it, you may not, but sometimes even just having this language can be supportive for us, because I will hear people say a lot in session, oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one who feels this way, but maybe there are some things that I need to do so that I don't feel so dysregulated by it.
Yeah, I think, a couple of the things you're saying really resonate with me. I think one, that your attachment style can change in context of the relationship, like, because I definitely wouldn't consider myself to have an anxious attachment to my partner now. Same partner, same relationship, but it definitely very much grew and changed. And I think the attachment style can very much play into those sort of power dynamics and the dynamics of consent. Like you mentioned, whether or not you're going to have sex at the end of the day. And for me, I definitely felt like whether or not we were going to have sex was indicative of, are we still close? Like, is this relationship still going well? I was very, very anxious in that. And then I think inherently my partner felt some pressure to be physically intimate because I felt rejected if we weren't. And so that was another way in which it was really, really important for me to acknowledge that, because at the time in my mind, I felt like he was maybe pulling away from me, but that was kind of just something that I'd created, and I was finding the pieces in my life to kind of validate how I was feeling, I guess. And so those were important discussions to have, to be like, it was my first like real relationship as well, and it's like, we're gonna, as you go out in a relationship for longer, you're going to go through periods of time where there's a lot less physical intimacy, but it doesn't mean that the emotional intimacy isn't there. And realizing my attachment style and how that played into that specific relationship, I think, was very important in maturing and how I, conduct my relationship in other ways as well.
What will you say to young people who are navigating like new relationships where they might feel like they don't have much of a say, or there's a power imbalance? Because it seems like you've obviously gotten to a point with your partner where it feels quite equal from just what I was hearing. So what would your advice be?
Oh gosh, kind of identifying how you engage in that relationship, how you feel. Identifying your own feelings first and foremost, I think, is so important. Like I said, quite often we can be conditioned to just behave in a certain way, kind of unconsciously, not really thinking about what we're doing. We just do it. We're told to do something, we do it. Like, it's just natural. And I think you have to really stop and ask yourself some questions about, why am I feeling this way? Why do I act this way when presented with this problem? And really getting to the bottom of your feelings, so that when you're in those situations, maybe you can actually piece together how you feel about something without just acting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Just quickly, would you say, if I'm in a relationship, if my relationship and we're very affectionate, whether it be in public or in front of my kids, it's kiss, hello, bye, I love you. Would you say showing that sort of love to my partner or her to me in front of the kids, would that model them for future relationships down the track, that they will be like that? Or
It's such a great question. And I think that often, seeing your parents, the way that they engage with each other and the way that they speak to each other does model and can be a really great blueprint of how to care for and how to respect someone. And actually in session, what people will say a lot is that if they didn't have that, if they didn't see the way that their parents could resolve a conflict, or they didn't see intimacy, or they didn't see the ways that they were coming together, they've then sort of found it harder later in life to navigate that themselves. So being able to see the way that your parents do or do not engage with each other can, of course, like have an impact on relationships.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. How do you navigate that with your partner?
I'm very affectionate, so I come from that as well with my parents. It's a kiss when you get home, kiss before bed, or I love you. And I could be over the top with it all the time, and sometimes my partner would be like, you just say things, you're just saying it now. So no, I actually say it because I like it. I feel like saying it because I love you, you know?
Yes.
And she sort of comes from a family where it's not so affectionate, so I can be a bit over the top sometimes. And I've got to sort of catch myself thinking, you know, it's not that she doesn't want to, it's just that she doesn't really know how to react sometimes because she wasn't really shown so much of it.
Yes, yeah, and this is such, I think, an important conversation to have with our partners as well, which is, you know, when you say, and I guess I'll step away and just use it as an example more broadly, not your relationship, but when you say, I'm over the top with my love, is it that you don't know or you don't want to be as over the top, or that feels like a new language to you, or is it that it's overwhelming, or like
I just don't want to be annoying. Understanding that, you know, that she didn't have that around her all the time with kisses and cuddles all the time, and I was shown that with my parents, just randomly having a cuddle or something like that. My grandparents would just start dancing for no reason in the lounge room, you know, and I thought that was the normal thing. So just trying to make sure I'm not over the top and annoying her. She could be just sitting down. She could have had a long day. You don't know how she's feeling right now. She's just trying to have a minute to herself, and then here I come along trying to have a cuddle or something. She's just trying to have a minute to herself.
Yes.
Just trying to understand and pick my time with that,
And I think that this is an important thing in a loving, safe, consensual relationship. Sometimes we don't know like someone's boundaries or limits, and sometimes we don't know our own boundary or limit till we've met it. And it might be that, you know, I was okay to have a hug or a kiss, but now I actually just need space.
Yep.
And sometimes we only really understand that when we're feeling it. And it's also like perhaps a distinction and awareness between the different ways that we show and receive love. So it sounds like you're a really affectionate person, and that supports you in getting really close to your partner. And then other people, they show and receive love in different ways. Like it could be doing something, or, you know, a thought, or even giving their partner space is an act of love, because they're like, I want to be close to you, but I know you need this, so this is my act of love and care for you as well.
Yeah. That was really great to share that. I think it'd be a good time to shift the conversation into when power becomes problematic. So we're going to jump into coercive control. And so, Georgia, at what point does sort of influence over someone become control, and what does coercive control actually look like?
It can look like many different things. And I think that if, you know, an example might be often jealousy is romanticized. So this idea that if they really love me, they will feel jealous if I go out and flirt with someone else or so on. And I think that we also need to normalize jealousy. Like feeling jealous isn't inherently a bad thing. However, what we do with it can go from being something that is just a human emotion to harm. And I think anytime we are controlling someone's behavior, so the way that they dress or what they do or who they hang out with or who they speak or, even what they think about. I think like that is often when it gets into a territory that is really dangerous. And I think that it's been interesting to see how there are the ways in which technology is really changing these discussions as well. So I know there's a lot of like find my friends things which, can be wrapped up in a package of I want to make sure you're getting home safe. But, in a different context, it can be tracking a person and where they're going and who they're hanging out with. And the same can go with looking at someone's text messages. Like it's often people will say in session, I'm really embarrassed to say this, or I can't believe I did it because it's against my values, but I thought something was up and I looked at their messages. And, that I guess is, someone's entitlement to privacy. The way they message or who they message is often a really private act, and it's something that people want to keep to themselves, and it can feel really violating when someone reads their messages. And at the same time, I know many people have done it. Many people have read messages and they wouldn't consider themselves as exerting control over someone. So I think it's a really incredible question. There is absolutely a line when it becomes coercive and abusive, but there is also an area where it is murky and it is really grey, which I think is what so many of us struggle with, because we can't always say this is wrong and this is right.
I had a conversation quite recently with a younger friend who we were talking about like boundaries in relationships and whatnot, and he was saying that he's like, one of my boundaries is I don't like her going to the beach wearing her old bikinis that don't fit anymore because she's like they're too big for her now, and she knows that they might fall off and people will see things, and she knows that makes me uncomfortable. So like if she's wearing that bikini that she knows might fall off, and she knows that I don't like that, then she's kind of like crossing my boundary because she's doing something I don't like, knowing that I don't like it. And it's like, in my mind, I was like, that's not a boundary. That's just like, you're just telling her what to dress and how to wear. But in this friend's mind, they're like, but I think it was not so much about the fact that she was wearing it. It's the fact that she knew that wearing it would make him uncomfortable. And it was like she's doing something I don't like, regardless of whether I like it or not. And I think that, especially when you're in the throes of that jealousy, the lines can become murky, and you really have to sort of look and ask yourself the right questions, because he was like, no, but like I don't like it, so that's my boundary. And
I think just on that as well, Campbell, if you'd be comfortable, Georgia, sort of distinguishing between like what is a healthy boundary and what's not, because I know there was something that kind of went around online a while ago about Jonah Hill's, quote unquote boundaries, and they weren't really great examples of them.
Yes. So a boundary is something we set in relation to someone or something else, whereby essentially we take a moment to figure out what it is that we want or need, and we communicate that with others. And it essentially tells them how we can show up and what we're willing or wanting to do. And I think it's been really great in, the past few years, we've seen so much discussion about boundaries. But what we've also seen is people kind of like cherry pick the idea of boundaries and use the language, what we might say sort of weaponize this therapy talk, and apply it to something that isn't necessarily a boundary. So a boundary is something we choose for ourselves and for our bodies and what we're wanting. And I guess this example of telling someone what they can wear, like the Jonah Hill thing too, isn't a boundary. And unfortunately, it feels really confusing when someone says, this is my boundary, because it backs you into a corner and it makes you think, I actually don't know if I can argue with this because you're telling me about a boundary you have, and am I crossing that boundary if I wear my bikini that's too big or too small for me? So it can feel really confronting and challenging for this person. What, I would be curious about if someone came to session, or if I was having a conversation with someone who said, I feel uncomfortable when my partner wears these things, to ask them, you know, what does it feel like? Like, why do you feel uncomfortable? What are you nervous about? And if they were to be like, well, someone else will see their body, then we might talk about autonomy and what it is like for someone to have autonomy over their body. And yes, you're in relationship with them, but you don't have ownership or control over their body. And that extends to what they can and can't wear. And it can feel really unsafe when you're in a relationship and your partner is telling you what you can or what you can't wear. And then also, I guess I'd be wanting to have a conversation around jealousy and to normalize it, that, you know, it's okay if you feel jealous, that, you know, that is a normal thing that many of us will feel. And often we feel jealous when we really like someone or we're really attracted to them and we're nervous that they're not going to like us and they're going to like someone else more, or they're going to leave us. But rather than using that jealousy to control someone, having a conversation around it. And I think that that distinction between what a boundary is and something we set for ourselves and what, you know, an act of control and telling someone else what they can do is really important.
Yeah.
I think it also ties back into sort of gendered expectations as well. And I think as men, we need to acknowledge that women's bodies are sexualized in a different way than men's bodies are sexualized, and, you know, I think the expectation to present their body a certain way to make sure that everything is covered up is very different for women than it is for men. And I think it's an expectation of women that isn't really of men, you know. Women are expected to go on the beach in a bikini, men usually wearing shorts, like nothing's really revealed. And so I think it's a criticism that doesn't really go both ways. And I think that sort of is part of why it's maybe more of a control than a boundary, you know, is that it's an expectation of a female partner that you wouldn't have of a male partner. And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge as well.
100%. Yeah, it's a great observation. And there were so many other sort of signs of coercive control you brought up, Georgia, which hopefully we can get to most of them. But we want to kind of come back to this location tracking. And I'm keen to get sort of your input on this, Will. As a dad, how are you comfortable with the idea that your children, or, you know, even your 10-year-old daughter might be on Find My Friends or Snap Maps, and then their friends can see their location, and potentially sometime in the future, like potential partners could see their location?
She's so young, so to them it's just a bit of a game also, that and it's nice for them to know where each other are and talk to each other. But for myself, I don't really have any tracking on my kids, on my daughter. As I said, she lives in Newcastle with her mum, and that if I were to have that, it'd be sort of invading on their life there. But yeah, I think it comes down to, like, I'm comfortable and I'm confident that my children are safe. But if there were a time that I would need to have any tracking on my daughter or kids, it'd be just safety concerns.
Yeah. And I know it's a little bit like down the road to think about, but would you have conversations with her about sort of being aware of these things, so that potentially one day a partner doesn't, you know, wrongly influence her to have her location on for safety reasons, but perhaps it comes from that sort of bad version of jealousy that you were mentioning, Georgia?
Yeah, definitely trying to educate my daughter and my kids about having those boundaries in place. And that's why I asked that question about the modelling of a relationship, trying to make sure that I model the best way that I can to the way a woman should be treated, and a way a man should treat a woman, and vice versa, with my sons and my daughter, within the future when they do go into a relationship, knowing that, hey, if they get into that relationship where either her partner wants to track her and her having the confidence to say, no, that's not how it is.
Then there is a sort of darker or more sinister side where we are seeing the ways that snap maps are used in cases of stalking and have been used to cause harm or assault. So it's really important we scrutinise this technology and we're aware of it, because I think it could also be the case that some young people don't even know, like they're not even aware of how an app like that can be used to cause harm because they're just having fun with their friends, and you know, they may be seeing the world in a really good and safe way that maybe they haven't been exposed to it yet. So without, you know, instigating fear or dread or, you know, trauma, or like the world is an inherently evil and bad place, but having an open dialogue with young people.
Campbell, have you had any experience with sort of location tracking, whether it's Find My Friends or Snap Maps?
Yeah, so I guess I have this like one story. I guess when I first started seeing my partner, and it was kind of my like first real relationship, and I was out, but I wasn't really ready to like tell my family and stuff that I was seeing somebody. I didn't really know where it was going to go, so I took them off my Snap Map so they couldn't see where I was. And I think I told them I was going to a friend's house or something. And my mum's like, oh, like, are you going to be home? I was like, oh, maybe not. I'll see like where the night goes. And then, you know, I wasn't on the Snap Map anymore, and not in a kind of coercive or controlling way. But then she started like asking my friends, what's Campbell up to? Where's Campbell going? Is Campbell seeing somebody? And we did have to have a discussion in that instance about that boundary of if I'm not telling you where I'm going, and mind you, I was 22 at this point. So if I'm not telling you where I'm going, then you're not necessarily like entitled to that information. And perhaps if you're a minor, maybe your parents are entitled to know where you are for your safety, but no one in your peer group or, you know, other adults in your life are entitled to the information to know where you are. And also just to like maintain an awareness of who has that information. I know that there have been like months and months can go by, years even, where I don't even remember that my location is on my Snap Map, in which time I've probably accrued a whole heap of different new contacts or new friends on Snapchat, whatever it might be. And I'm just completely unaware of who has my location. And I think it's important for us to be very actively conscious of who has that information rather than just having it be open, knowing that you have people that you trust and knowing that you can revoke that access at any time, and that's okay.
I think just going back to the dad questions again, just with, like I spoke to you about the modelling, if I'm going to be sort of, if just to say I was going to be tracking my daughter just for safety concerns, is that going to set her up for failure in when she gets into a relationship and her partner is saying that he wants tracking for her safety concerns, but really, and she's okay with that because that's what I said it when she was little?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I do see and I do hear how people will say because that behavior was normalized or, you know, it was kind of similar to what I grew up with, then it led me to expect that or to see that as okay in a romantic relationship. You know, we can still show care and we can still be supportive. Like, I want to make sure my friends get home safe after a night out, or I want to make sure you got back from the train okay, and I want to make sure that you're home in time for dinner. But it's a really different discussion when it is sort of tracking and controlling exactly where someone is.
I just want to go back and acknowledge great advice for young people, Campbell, that you gave before, and Will, amazing to hear these questions discussed openly. In the interest of time, your quote-unquote silly question, Will, because that is one of the signs of coercive control. Do you mind giving us a definition of love bombing, Georgia?
Yeah, so love bombing is essentially an intense love and affection or adoration that we show someone at the start of a relationship. And the ways in which it can be considered an act of control is that someone may do a lot, acts of service, buy them things, take them out for dinner, give them compliments, make them feel really, really good, and they bomb them with love, and then they sort of take it away. And then it's when they take it away that the person feels, wait, but we were thinking about a life together and you had said all these lovely things about me and I thought that we were going to, you know, be this unit, and now I'm feeling lost and now I'm trying to sort of move towards you to rebuild that connection. And some people might sort of do that a lot, the love bombs. So they'll drop a love bomb and then they'll back out and then this person is wanting more and then they'll drop another one. And so it can feel really hard to leave that dynamic because they get this real intensity that feels really good. then there's nothing. And then just as they feel like they're sort of done, they can be bombed again with the love. And it can feel like they're in this cycle, sort of waiting for the adrenaline and waiting for the connection again.
Nice. Do you feel like that answers the question?
Yes,
Yes, absolutely. Amazing definition. Thanks, Georgia. Just so, I wish it could go on forever, but just as we sort of round out, I've got a sort of final question for everyone. And Will, I know you've mentored a lot of young players through the Koori Knockout, and when you're there, you've been a winner of that. And as a former NRL player, you're obviously quite a figure at these events. How do you support them in a way that feels safe and respectful, especially when they're sort of young, just starting out?
It's just trying to give them the confidence, whether they're aspiring to be an NRL player or not. Just give them confidence that anything they want to do in life, they can achieve it. Doesn't matter what their circumstances are at that time or where they come from as a kid. They can make it as far as they want to. And for guys that are just entering the NRL, just to let them know that they have a voice. Don't enter it thinking that you need to be told this and that and you can't answer back. You can't say things and speak up for yourself.
Yeah, that's really amazing advice. And Campbell, what responsibilities do you feel people with more power have to ensure they're not causing harm, do you think?
I think having an awareness of the imbalance is really important. And I think we should always be asking ourselves, in any kind of relationship or interpersonal sort of connection, we should be asking ourselves, like, what is the power dynamic here? I think that's really important, understanding that if you offer a suggestion to somebody, are they going to take that as instruction or not, and why? I think that's important. I mean, like I said before, I guess acknowledging your own feelings as well and why you feel like you might need to communicate something in a certain way, such as as communicating a personal preference as a boundary, because it gives you a great deal of anxiety. Yeah, you need to kind of ask yourself, why am I feeling this way, and sit with those feelings and, and question whether or not you're having reasonable expectations of the people around you. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's great advice. Like a lot of introspection.
Yeah.
That's really great advice. And Georgia, just to finish with you, where can people turn for help if they recognise that there are unhealthy power dynamics in their relationships?
So where can people turn to help? I think that there are some great resources. So it could be 1-800-RESPECT if you're needing support, but it could be a trusted loved one. It could be a therapist or practitioner. I guess it depends on whether they're at school. There might be a great school counsellor. I think get the Chanel's book, it's obviously amazing, and it can provide a lot of validating information around what consent and what power dynamics can look like. And I think maybe the first thing is to sort of also trust it. Like if you're feeling like something is a bit icky or feeling like something's a bit off, trust that. And there are so many great free online resources and tools available.
I feel like we could have chatted for double the amount of time and I learned so much, and I'm so glad. I feel like we really embodied that no silly questions. I feel like all of us sort of ask questions that you might internalize because you go, I think I should know the answer to this, so I'm not going to ask it. So I'm really glad we got to see those discussions play out, and I can't thank you all enough for being here today and contributing. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Campbell. Thank you, Will.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And you can head to teachusconsent.com or Teach Us Consent's Instagram page for more information.